Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Stop your friendlies if anybody is playing friendlies. My name is Coach Ben. We're here live at the Co-op Esports Gaming Arena here in Edmond, Oklahoma. It is a blustery Thursday, as it were. And today, I'm not sure why it's so crispy, but it shouldn't be so crispy on the stream. Do you want to check the stream while we're doing this? Check the health of the stream. Pull it up. And today I'm going to talk about spacing. This is, I think, a really important and often underexplored topic, primarily because, it's one of those ideas about a game that is very ubiquitous, but, it's very poorly explained. Usually people are like, oh, your spacing was bad, or, you just need to space better. But that doesn't actually mean anything, or at least it, never meant anything for me, If someone told me to space better, what does that mean? It's kind of a valueless statement. So today we're going to unpack a little bit about spacing, right? And I'm going to teach you how to understand spacing in ways that are actually understandable and you can apply. So let's kind of get to my PowerPoint. Of course, you can see it's got spacing on it. Say hello again, Mr. Sakurai. This is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about why spacing is important, and then we're going to be going over my what I call the pagoda of spacing. Okay. That's, I don't really care what it looks like on there. So what do I mean by a pagoda of spacing? So, if you've watched any of the old kung fu movies, one time, Bruce Lee has to navigate this dangerous pagoda where each level is a different threat. And I like to think about spacing in this context because it allows me to neatly categorize them in ways that, none of the spacings are, necessarily better than one another. It's just each floor is different and unique and has its own challenges. We're also going to talk about risk and reward versus matchup considerations. Okay, so why should you care about spacing? Safety in Ultimate is derived from two things. It's the frame data of the move itself and how far away you are from your opponent. Those are the two things that you need to understand spacing. And today we're mostly going to be focusing on horizontal spacing because it, I think, is the key to understanding neutral in Ultimate's engine. So what is good spacing? I'm going to introduce what I'm going to refer to as Ben's Law. So safety in Ultimate is defined as frame data and your spacing, the distance from your opponent. So if you want to know how safe you are, this is the formula that you should be applying. And if you're getting punished for something, there's probably something wrong with one of the two categories here. Either your frame data is not actually safe enough at the spacing that you were using it at, or your move is just not safe no matter what spacing it's used at. Okay, so here's an example of what I mean by that. In front of me I have two different hitboxes. We have Crom's jab and Roy's jab. These are the same move in practice, but with some slight variations. And so, as many of you know, Crom is a all-rounder counterpart to Roy, and he does not have a sweet spot or sour spot on any of his hitboxes. So this means that every single bubble that Crom has on his jab is -10 on the early hit. So this means that no matter where he hits you, he always gets the same safety on shield or on whiff, which means that really he gets the same reward when he spaces this jab versus when it's not spaced at all. And so this, by nature, encourages Crom to space all of his moves because, for one, he's not penalized for spacing, but two, he has inherently less safe frame data at point blank. And you can see that when you look at Roy's jab here. It's kind of the opposite, right? So he has red hitboxes and purple hitboxes. The red hitboxes are the hilt and purple is tippered. So Roy actually gets extra safety at point blank range. But when he's spacing the purple hitbox, he actually gets less safety. And so, there's kind of this parallel, right? Both of these characters are encouraged to play in different ways in the engine because the moves are coded to have different rewards and risks for spacing. It's still kind of Roy's turn sometimes if he jabs your shield, where for the most part it can be Crom's turn is over at point blank. But when you space it, the move, the situation is reversed, and Crom actually has better shield pressure than Roy when he is spacing his jab. So let's begin with my so-called pagoda of spacing. Please appreciate these small GIF that loop. I worked very hard on these. It took a long time to make them. So the first level of spacing is unspaced. If you're looking at the Mario here, he does two things, right? He does this nair and he does the back air. And this is a very simple spacing, right? You're as close to your opponent as you can. And this is kind of, again, we're looking at Ben's law. We're applying how safety is both spacing and frame data. So in this case, the Mario Nair, it's not spaced at all, and so he's going to get punished by the grab. But Mario's frame data has great, Mario's back air has great frame data, and because of that, he's able to force his way in around this interaction, even though he's unspaced and Cloud is right next to him. And this is kind of what I mean by how safety requires both, right? Like, in Ultimate, generally speaking, characters are balanced so that they either have range or they have really superb frame data, but they don't have both. And if they do have both, it's usually very conditional, like there's a projectile or some kind of setup involved. Let's move on to our next category here, the second level in the pagoda. We have spaced on hit. So this spacing allows you to still hit your opponent. In this case, you should be looking at Mario doing the back air. I want you to visualize the shield not being there. Mario is trying to hit Cloud with his back air, right? He's still close enough that he can hit him, but he's not as close as he possibly could be, and so the grab is not hitting even if he just stands there. That's what this spacing refers to. And as the blurb says, this is useful if you want to try and go for a direct hit, but don't want to leave your character at maximum risk of being retaliated. And also, again, this can be useful for baiting shields. So in the first clip, if we go back to unspaced, right, like Cloud may be thinking, oh, I can grab this, But with this second spacing, it might look like he can, but he'll whiff because you've spaced on hit and you're not unspaced. And this can, if you predict this, it can allow you to open up your opponent and get very strong punishes if you can make them overextend out of shield. So we're going to talk about this briefly before we get to the third level. Retreating aerials. So this is kind of spaced on hit. The major difference is that you are essentially not landing right after you do the move. So let's take a look at this one. Mario is still landing on the ground like ASAP after he does the back air. So where he lands, he mostly goes there. Let me go in-game here to provide you with an example of what I mean. So I'm going to pull up my little in-game thingy. Let me switch my tabs here. I'll show you more what I mean by this. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Alright, so let's go to training, and I'll kind of give you an example of what I mean by retreating aerials. So in this game, there's two kinds of spacing that you can use, or two kinds of two kinds of spacing. There's horizontal spacing, but there's also vertical spacing. And so retreating aerials are kind of this like gray zone, where on paper it's not very safe, but due to the way your character moves afterwards, it's very safe. And I'm going to use Cloud because Cloud has been used in online videos previously as a very good example of what this means. Alright, so let's go into random, and we're going to kind of unpack retreating aerials a bit and what it means. Okay, so we have a Zelda. We can configure her to hold shield, and then we can also configure her to do an up special every time that her shield is touched. Beautiful. Easy. Okay, so if I'm spaced on hit, I still might get hit by the startup, because even though I'm spacing out of grab, some up Bs are kind of big. Like, they can be kind of large, and it's very difficult to unspace them horizontally alone. And so what you want to do is you want to do a retreating aerial. But to retreat after you swing, you can't land right afterwards. Because if the hitbox comes out, and then the next thing you do is land, like right here, the hitbox comes out and then Cloud lands. He doesn't have time to go anywhere. So what you want to do is you want to hit them, and then drift away. And so even though all this time in the air, Cloud is more vulnerable because he's not as vertically safe, he's horizontally safe, and you end up being much farther away from your opponent than you were as possible. So compare where Cloud landed here to the first time. Right, and you can kind of space a little bit too, but so if you compare this to this, like the distance is subtle, but it's very useful when you play sword characters, and it's why stage control is so important, because if you don't have stage control and you're cornered, if you want to use an aerial, you kind of have to like approach with it, and it makes it hard to space. But if you have stage control, then you can be right up on them and space backwards. And this is like how Swordies functions, essentially, at a high level. Okay, we're going to continue. Let me switch back to my other monitor, and we're going to go to the third level of spacing. Technically, retreating aerials have like You can use them in multiple spacing configurations, but the most common is I want to touch your shield and then leave. Okay, so level 3, we have spaced on block. This is kind of the other half, right? We're going to start getting into the more abstract uses of spacing. So now we have to understand that we're no longer spacing to hit somebody. We're instead spacing to control space. If my opponent stands still, I'm not going to hit them. But if they move into my space that I'm controlling, they're going to get swatted. And this is a big part of what people don't get about spacing. Like, you're trying to hit somebody when hitting somebody is like paradoxical to what makes it good spacing. It's good spacing because they have to run into the move to get hit by them. So looking at Mario here, we can explain this in 2 ways. He does 2 back airs. The first back air, he's trying to space on hit, and he's trying to hit the cloud. And because of that, he's getting hit by the up B. But the second one, the Mario, stands a little farther away, and he's no longer using his back air in a way that could hit cloud. Instead, he's just hitting the tip of the shield, which kind of extends out in front of him. And as you can see, Mario is safe with one, but not safe with the other. This is, generally speaking, what spacing better looks like. You're no longer trying to hit your opponent. You're now just trying to hit their shield. Let's move on to our next category in the pagoda. We now have spaced off block. We're starting to run into these more abstract spacing concepts that are very real. Like I said, we are now controlling space. We're no longer trying to hit our opponent. Now I'm not even hitting the shield. My hitbox is directly outside of the shield, and the only way that they could get hit is if they drop their shield and approach. And so, like, as an example for here, what we want to do, we can do a fighting game character example. And I want to really demonstrate this because, like, I think it's important. So with the Zelda, if the Zelda is, if the Zelda is waiting in shield and they parry this back air, they have a very good chance of being able to punish me for it. However, if I just sit here and I back air outside of their zone, they're never going to be able to parry to actually punish me. And this is really important when you play against characters like Luigi. It's important when you play against characters like Ken or Ryu, Terry, or Kazuya, because they don't have very good out-of-shield options, but they have great ground buttons. And so, like, for them, they are actually hoping that you hit their shield, because instead of spacing on block like you wanted to, they parry it, and now you're at a disadvantage, and they can just act immediately. So with these kind of matchups, it's much more important that you actually don't hit their shield, and you space off block instead to force them to drop their shield badly and deal with that 11 frames of lag instead of getting the beneficial parry. Okay, let's move on. We're going to move on to the 5th level now. We're now entering a super abstract version of spacing. So now we're doing what's called spaced off burst. And this is not intuitive at all. Like, because the goal is to hit somebody, right? But in this one, it's actually a little different. So what we're wanting to do is making it look like we're spacing off block, but we're even farther back than normal. And there's a very good reason for this. There is a category of characters that do not actually want to interact with your buttons because they don't have a lot of range. They want to whiff punish. And so what they're doing is they're waiting for you to swing, and then they invade your space. I can think of 2 really good examples of characters that like to whiff punish: Greninja and Captain Falcon. These are characters that don't directly contest your buttons, and they're instead trying to just invade your space. And they don't want to get stuffed, so what they'll do is they'll be patient, and they'll sit in the mid-range, and then they'll wait for you to press a button, and then they run in. And that's what this spacing is designed to do. So if Mario was spacing off block, he might still be in landing lag when Captain Falcon or Greninja get there, and so they're going to get whiff punished. But by spacing even farther back, spacing off of burst, what you're doing is you're making the Greninja and the Captain Falcon have to travel farther to get to you, which means that it takes longer for their hitbox to come out. And this gives you time to shield, this gives you time to spot dodge, this gives you time to press a second button, or even just do a dash back input. And so this kind of spacing is very important in matchups that rely heavily on whiff punishing, because you're essentially trying to visually bait your opponent with the back air. You're saying, haha, I'm doing this back air, now it's your turn. But it's not actually their turn because you're spaced a little bit farther back than they expected. But they don't have time to check the spacing. They just have to assume it's their turn, so they just go. And that's why this spacing is effective. It's a baiting tool. Okay, we're going to talk about crossups also a little bit before we're done. This is kind of a unique spacing thing. It's technically, under the unspaced category, but it deserves its own category because really you can apply crossups in a lot of ways. So crossups are not unique to Super Smash Bros. They're ubiquitous across fighting games. Ever since Street Fighter 2, crossups have mattered. This is like as old of a fighting game mechanic as it gets. And the idea is that characters can have strong and weak sides, but also really you don't have a side that you can protect yourself as much. And in unreactable situations where you don't know what the next option is, you have to guess which side they land on. And this clip shows you a good example of that, where the Mario nairs in front of Cloud's shield, or back airs in front of Cloud, but before the hitbox comes out, the cross-up happens, and they're completely safe. And so, like, your opponent has to guess, are you going to cross up or are you not going to cross up? And especially the nair is very deceptive. The back air, he's drifting behind him the whole way, but if you look at this nair, Mario jumps straight up and then drifts forward. Right? It's very ambiguous over which side he's actually going to land on. And so this is a useful skill. And many characters are capable of doing that because, like, again, not every matchup has tools that work on the same side. And I think a great example of this is Joker. So we're going to go to Joker and let's do some options. What's up? Oh, yeah, I got to switch it. You're right. I'm getting better about it. Okay, I'm getting better at it. Okay, so why do crossups matter? I explained it, but I'd like to also... I turned on stale moves. I don't know why. I'd like to kind of showcase why it matters. So let's make Joker mash a back air as shield. Cool. Yay, good job, Joker. So if I'm behind him and I hit his shield, if I hit him with a certain, kind of move, or like maybe let's do that forward tilt. Hello. There we go. So if I'm behind him... Okay, well, these aren't really great examples. There we go. I'll do a rising aerial. So, like, he can back air out a shield if I'm behind him. Unless I... This is a bad character to test it with. Because all of his landing lag low profiles. There we go. I finally found a move I can use. So, if Joker has a really strong window back behind him, because back air is a very good move, but he doesn't have great options in front of him. So, if you're baiting the back air by being behind him, but then you end up being in front of him, like this, if you're behind him and then you cross him up, he knows that his forward aerial and his neutral air are not that fast, so he's going to want to use his strong back air, especially because he sees you sitting behind him. But then you cross him up at the last second, and because he went for the back air, you're kind of taking advantage of his limited out of shield options. And you can also punish that, like, for example, Joker's up smash is very strong, but it doesn't hit behind him. So you can take advantage of that as well. If you hit a shield from the front, you might get stuffed or punished by the... Oh, Jesus. Okay. There we go. Okay, so obviously, like, being in front of Joker, that's kind of his best or quickest option. But if you cross him up, it almost doesn't even look like I'm going to get behind him. But then I do end up behind him. Right? Like, it looks like I'm going to land in front of you, but then I don't. And then Cloud also can obviously drift away as usual and be super safe. This is why Cloud is a good character, by the way. It doesn't look like I'm going to land in front of you, but I will. And you can do that with back air, too. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of show by doing what I'm talking about with why crossups are useful. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. This one was kind of short this week because it's more just like explaining about these ideas and then you go apply them. But I wanted to give people a framework for like what spacing means. You need to start thinking about like what kind of spacing is appropriate for each situation. And generally speaking, sword characters are going to be spacing on block and off block, and then frame data characters that are stubby will be doing unspaced and spaced on hit as mix-ups. But sometimes they can do spaced on block as well. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.